They say fingerprints don't lie. They don't forget. And they don't belong to people who don't exist yet. When police told Lena Hartley her fingerprints matched a homicide scene from 1986, she laughed, because it had to be a mistake. Lena was a quiet art teacher. 32 years old. Born after the crime. A woman whose life had never brushed against violence. But the print was perfect. Every ridge. Every loop. A flawless match to a murder committed before she was born. What followed wasn't a wrongful accusation, it was something far more unsettling. A buried family secret. A death ruled an accident. And a scientific anomaly so rare it forced investigators to ask an impossible question. The first time Lena Hartley heard the words "your fingerprints match," she laughed nervously. Surely, it had to be a mistake. There had been some mix-up, some glitch. That kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. Lena was 32. A high school art teacher. Quiet, meticulous, predictable. She drove the speed limit, alphabetized her spice rack, and mailed handwritten thank you notes for birthday gifts. The closest she'd ever been to trouble was a parking ticket, forgotten because she had been grading midterms. So when the detective on the other end of the phone asked her to confirm her date of birth, August 12, 1987, Lena assumed it was about the volunteer background check she had submitted weeks ago. Then he paused. And said slowly, carefully, "Miss Hartley, the fingerprints we ran match a homicide investigation from 1986. There was a buzzing in her ears, a sharp static that made her stomach lurch. "That's impossible," she said. "I wasn't alive." The detective didn't argue. He only said, "We know. That's why we need to talk." The case had a name, though she wouldn't learn it for hours. At the time, it was just a file number. A cold case, stuffed into a yellowed folder at the bottom of a steel cabinet. Photographs with corners curling, evidence bags sealed with brittle tape, brittle enough that it crumbled at the touch. Margaret Bell had been found dead in her Hollow Ridge home in the summer of 1986. She was 43, divorced, no children, and worked nights at a textile mill that shuttered 2 years later. Her neighbor discovered her after noticing her porch light had been on for 3 days straight. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The unofficial cause, whispered for decades, was betrayal. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No ransacked drawers. Margaret had known her killer. Possibly even invited them in. The fingerprint was found smeared halfway up the bedroom door near the latch. At the time, databases were primitive. The print was photographed, documented, and filed. No match. No suspect. Slowly, the case went cold. Until Lena filled out the fingerprint scan for her volunteer position. Until a technician running routine cross-checks against newly digitized cold case files felt his stomach drop. The fingerprint didn't just resemble the old one. It was identical. Knees shaking, Lena sat in the interview room the next morning. Detective Aaron Pike, early 40s, weary eyes, sat across from her. He had learned to wear calm like armor. Lena could see it in the crease of his jaw. "We know this is upsetting," he said. "But we need to establish a few things." Lena nodded, though her body felt disconnected from her thoughts. "Have you ever been to Hollow Ridge?" "No." "Do you know anyone named Margaret Bell?" "No." "Ever handle her possessions? Furniture, antiques, heirlooms?" "No," Lena said again, her voice trembling. Pike slid a photograph across the table. It was a black and white close-up of the partial fingerprint lifted from the door. Next to it, digitally enhanced, was Lena's. Every ridge, every loop, every bifurcation matched. "Fingerprints don't change," Pike said. "Injuries, aging, they don't alter the core pattern." "I wasn't alive," Lena whispered. "We know," he said. In the days that followed, the investigation was quiet. No sirens, no press conferences. Just calls, records requests, and old boxes pried open. Lena was allowed to go home but advised not to leave town. She didn't sleep. She barely ate. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that photograph. Her fingerprint. On a door that had been touched decades before her birth. She called her mother, Lena Hartley, as soon as dawn broke. Her voice trembled, caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. "What's wrong?" Evelyn asked. Lena tried to explain. "Fingerprints. Murder." 1986, Evelyn's silence was long, uncomfortably long. When she finally spoke, she exhaled softly. "Oh," she said. That was the first hint Lena had that something in her life had been a lie. They met 2 days later at a diner halfway between their homes. Evelyn looked smaller than Lena remembered, her face worn with a secret carried too long. They sat across from each other, uncomfortably close. Neither touched the coffee they had ordered. "You were adopted," Evelyn said finally. "No," Lena said. "I would know that." "I never legally adopted you," Evelyn replied. "I raised you." The words slid over Lena like ice water. "You told me I was born at St. Mary's," Lena said. "I showed you a bracelet," Evelyn said. "Not the real one." Lena's heart pounded. "Who am I?" Evelyn looked away. Long pause. Then, almost a whisper, "Your birth mother, was Margaret Bell." The diner tilted beneath her feet. "She died in 1986, Lena said, voice hollow. "Yes," Evelyn admitted. "But you survived." The truth came in fragments. Evelyn had been Margaret's younger sister. They had grown up in Hollow Ridge, a volatile household, an alcoholic mother who disappeared early, and a father who was rarely kind. Margaret had been fiercely protective, working nights so Evelyn could finish school. She had secrets. Men who came and went. Bruises she never explained. In spring 1986, Margaret discovered she was pregnant. The father unknown. Fearful and alone, she confided in Evelyn. Evelyn was 19, newly married, desperate to escape Hollow Ridge. The night Margaret was killed, Evelyn had been there. Trying to persuade her sister to leave town. They fought. Margaret fell, hit her head on the dresser. Evelyn panicked. Margaret was barely breathing. "I didn't call anyone," Evelyn whispered, tears in her eyes. "I told myself she was dying anyway. That the baby would never survive." She pressed a towel over her sister's mouth. Held it there until there was silence. And then, 2 months later, Evelyn gave birth to Lena. Early, too small, but alive. The story could have ended there. A tragic accident, a mercy killing rationalized by fear. But fingerprints don't lie. And the fingerprint at the scene belonged to Lena. Not Margaret. Not Evelyn. Lena. The forensic explanation was rare. Disturbing. A phenomenon known as chimerism. In rare cases, fraternal twins merge in utero. One twin absorbs the other, leaving traces of DNA, or fingerprints, from the absorbed twin. Lena had absorbed a twin she never knew existed. A twin who had touched the door in Margaret's bedroom, decades before Lena was born. The legal system closed the case. Evelyn, racked by guilt and age, died less than a year later. Lena moved away. Changed her name. Stopped volunteering. Sometimes, she looks at her hands for too long. Tracing the lines, the loops, the ridges. Wondering which belonged to her, and which belonged to someone who never got to live, but somehow left a mark the world could never forget. And every so often, when she closes her eyes, she swears she can feel a memory of a hand on a door, waiting.